Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman. And in this episode, I'm talking with Michelle Montone, who I actually spoke with back in episode 81 of this podcast, because Michelle and I are both intermittent fasters and we're both in perimenopause. Even if we're not quite the same age, we're both at that stage of life where our hormones are kind of playing tricks with us. And reducing sugar or cutting it out completely, like in my case, plays a huge part in how we deal with this stage of life. We recorded this episode for Michelle's podcast, which is called Fast and Fabulous, but then we decided to share it. So we'll get to our chat in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources about how to get rid of cravings, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. And come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. Okay, so here's my chat with Michelle.
I am so excited to have you here and do an update episode.
Lovely to be here.
How have you been for the past year plus?
Oh, I've been great, thank you. And fasting as usual. I'm kind of struggling actually with perimenopause, to be quite honest. But and I'd like to also for us to talk about that to do with fasting and to do with, as you know, I lead a sugar-free and flour-free life, but I think perimenopause threw a spanner in the works, quite frankly.
Oh my gosh, Netta, I'm so glad that you said that word, because perimenopause is something that not only am I struggling with, but so many people are, and we don't talk about it enough.
Exactly.
So, and as fasters, I think we do need to open up the door to the topic, and so let's chat about that. Let's chat about perimenopause and how that's kind of thrown a wrench into your journey.
Yeah, you say wrench. I think I said spanner, but we understand each other.
I know.
Well, here's the thing. So I'm 53 and a half, getting on for 54 actually. And I thought that I was well on the way to being menopausal. And according to my doctor, my family doctor, and I'm in Canada, so we don't get all the fancy tests that you may have in the States, certainly not because it's a so-called free health system that we have here. But anyway, he sent off some of my blood for testing, and he came back and said to me, Netta, you're in menopause. But the thing is, but I can't tell because I haven't had a bleeding for about 10 years because I had my uterus cauterized. We'll get straight into the details here. I had my tubes taken out and one ovary quite a few years ago because I had cysts, and they said, while we're taking your ovary out, we might as well take out your tubes, your fallopian tubes, because that's often where ovarian cancer begins. So as a preventative measure, and I'm like, well, you're in there anyway. But
Might
they
as
left
well.
my uterus in, and I said, while you're in there, cauterize it, which just means sort of burn the lining so that I don't bleed every month. It's just not useful to do that anyway, which means that I can't go according to my cycle with the bleeding. So I don't really know if it's stopped or not. Anyway, the doctor comes back and says, yes, according to these tests, you are menopausal now at 53. But the thing is, I've also been seeing another doctor behind his back. No, he knows about it because he knows the other doctor, who's more specialized in women's health and especially in perimenopause and menopause and bioidentical hormones. And she ran way more comprehensive tests and said, no, Netta, you have a lovely cycle still, right? You are perimenopausal, but nowhere near menopausal, despite my age, right? So even though I respect my family doctor greatly, and it's not because he's a man that I think he doesn't know much about hormones and women's things, not at all. It's just because he's a family doctor. He's not specialized in hormones and the right kinds of tests and the right times to run these tests, right? Whereas the other doctor had me take several tests in 2-week intervals and could then see from the results that no, I have a cycle and my lack of bleeding has nothing to do with what my one little solitary ovary floating in space in my body, what that is doing. And that ovary is still producing estrogen or estrogen or however you pronounce it in the States. And, you know, my body is still producing the hormones. It's starting to go down now, she says.
Okay.
And so it definitely is perimenopause.
Sure.
But certainly I'm not menopausal.
This is really important to unpack because you said the major difference between your family doctor and the other doctor you were seeing is that I would say, is it a functional medicine doctor you're seeing?
Not even. She's just specialized
Just a
in,
specialist. Okay.
yeah,
She did it at the certain times in your cycle where you would want to look and see where is your estrogen at this moment in your cycle? Where is your progesterone this moment in your cycle? And that can tell you if you're in peri or actually in menopause.
exactly.
But if you're just testing one time randomly in your cycle, and that happened to me, and it was the same, I was just at my OBGYN, same thing. They did one test randomly in my cycle and said, everything's fine with your hormones. You're totally fine. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that you have to make sure that you're getting tested at these certain times in your cycle to see where your hormones are at. So with that being said, you're still in perimenopause.
Yes, that's what she said, because my hormones have the test, and it was kind of random. That 2-week interval was relatively random, and from the results, you could see where I was in my cycle because we couldn't time it to be at the beginning of my cycle because I don't know when the beginning of my cycle is, right?
Right.
But it doesn't matter. It's in 2 weeks, she can see from the results, oh, you're where normally you would have been menstruating, or you're around your ovulation or in the luteal phase, which is after. So it's like she could tell just from the results. And yes, she said, you're in perimenopause, your hormones are starting to go down. And she has given me progesterone.
Okay.
Just to kind of even things out. The reason why I went to see her was that for the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months, I have been experiencing what those of us who don't know much about perimenopause or menopause, I have been experiencing the symptoms of what I thought was menopause, which is hot flashes, irritability, you know, and kind of just generally on edge, kind of like long-term PMS,
Yeah.
really.
Yep.
Reminds
Mhm.
me of what I used to have in my 30s and 40s. And so I thought, because I didn't know much about it before I read up on it, I thought this was menopause.
Mm.
But what I found was that no, most of the symptoms happen in perimenopause.
Mhm.
One of the symptoms, in air quotes, that I had was that I was fasting just as before, if not longer, but I was getting a pooch around the belly. I was gaining belly fat. And it wasn't because my eating window was longer. In fact, on the contrary, as I was seeing this happen, I lengthened my fasting hours and I was OMAD most days, 1 meal a day, and it was still happening. This belly fat, you know, everything's relatively on a small scale because I'm such a small person to
Mhm.
begin with, but still, it made me uncomfortable,
Of
it made
course.
my clothes tight.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't changing what I was eating. I haven't had sugar and flour and products made from them for over 8 years, and I certainly wasn't changing that during these last 18 months or so. And yet my body was changing.
Mm.
So more belly fat, more bloating, and just generally feeling like I was heavier. I don't weigh
Mhm.
myself, but it was a
Mhm.
feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally relate to that because I work out every day, I fast every day, and I usually just eat 1 meal a day. I'm younger than you, but I started perimenopause in my late 30s.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, the thing is that it, I did all the things and it didn't matter. I would still right in my midsection. So let you go on and tell me what conclusions have you come to from all of this, and how has it affected your fasting journey? Are you still doing 1 meal a day?
No, I've actually, you know, generally, since I started intermittent fasting over 8 years ago, generally I eat when I'm hungry, is what I tell people,
Yeah.
right? And it happens to be between once or twice a day.
Hmm.
And, you know, in days when I eat, it has happened that I've eaten 3 times a day and I get the feeling I'm just eating all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only 3 times, but generally it's two times or once a day. But I found myself, when I saw that belly fat hanging around my
Mm.
midsection, it's funny because I found myself actually trying to lengthen my fasting window, which I'd
Yeah.
never done before. It had always been more intuitive.
Yeah.
And it was like this little bit of diet brain that came back to haunt me of, oh,
Yep.
you're getting more pudgy, as we call it,
Mm.
around the
Hmm.
middle. Therefore, you need to not eat less, but eat less often or do something different. And I did that for a while and it didn't change much.
Mm.
And so I then basically, once I sort of slightly came out of the perimenopause symptoms, because they're a lot less sort of intense now.
Good.
Um, and I'm getting hormone therapy now. And
Okay.
that kind of settled things much more. In other words, it halted the belly fat and certainly halted like I suppose the bloating that I was having as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of went back to almost normal.
Okay.
Um, and still didn't change what I ate. And actually, some days I eat more often.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally. So HRT, in case you're listening, hormone replacement therapy, is when they give you, it depends. How are you taking your hormone replacement therapy? Sometimes it's orally, sometimes it's like a cream.
Yeah, I have both. So I
Okay.
have progesterone orally. She said it's actually a good idea to only take one rather than two. I can't remember the dosage, quite
Mm.
frankly, but she says you can crunch it like they're little capsules and
Mm.
the stuff is inside. She said you can actually crunch it with your teeth and the
Oh,
liquid kind of is even better absorbed through the
Sorry.
mucus in your mouth.
Yeah.
And if you swallowed it whole, and it goes down into your digestive system. But she says it could taste a bit like not very good, but it tastes fine to me because my taste is not like normal people.
Right,
She's
exactly.
like, well, it could taste bitter, or I can't remember exactly what she said. And I'm like, no, it tastes like chocolate to me.
It's fine. It's totally fine.
It's fine. You can't, my tastes have changed so much that anything
Yeah.
non-sweet still tastes sweet to me. So that's fine. And then the estrogen is in a cream form.
Okay.
Here in Canada, I was reading in the papers this morning that there's been a shortage of the patch form of estrogen, just from the manufacturing side of things. So anyway, she gave me cream for that.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better, and I'm glad all that is working for you. Because none of that worked for me. It's still, I can't take any hormones. My body is so sensitive that I just go into this whirlwind of crazy, crazy physical symptoms, crazy mental symptoms. So I have to do all the natural things, which still can be very, very, like, my body's just super, super sensitive. So I need to like do some more digging and some more researching on what I need to be doing. I don't know, because like you, I had my uterus cauterized and I don't know when my cycles come, which is a great thing, but then it's also very confusing.
Yeah.
But I'm only 42. I think that I'm still in perimenopause. I'm pretty sure I am. But yeah, so I'm glad that we kind of unpacked that, and that you realized that the one meal a day wasn't, even though you were trying to do something good and getting rid of that belly fat, you were trying to fast longer, eat less. But at the end of the day, when it's hormonal, when it comes down to it, that belly fat is normal in perimenopause. And if your estrogen and your progesterone is off, you can have such belly fat problem. Everything goes straight to the belly. And I have experienced it myself, and it's so frustrating because
Yeah.
you're doing everything right, and
Right.
yet you have this pooch down there.
Yeah. Yes. And the good news is, I have to say, for myself at least, is that it sort of got reabsorbed, as it were, and things, for a 53-year-old, I can say my body's not like it was when I was in my 20s, obviously, but it's certainly not as it was a year ago. It's actually
That's good news.
tightened up, I don't know if
Yeah,
it's autophagy or just the hormones or a bit of both, but it's better.
that's good to hear. That is so good to hear. So hormone replacement therapy, it can be very beneficial. Obviously, work with your medical practitioners, just as Ned is working with hers. And it's not for everyone, but it can definitely help you. And if it can, it's life changing.
I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast, and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews, and when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it, so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast, and for spreading the word about sugar.
So, Netta, I want to unpack some sugar related issues, because most of my clients, most people I know in this community, it's their number one struggle is sugar. It's a huge issue. It's a huge problem. And so when I say that most people struggle with sugar, I mean that, like, not everyone's a sugar addict, but they struggle with having too much of it, having it too often, having it every day as a treat. And so let's talk about, when should somebody consider completely saying goodbye to sugar in their life, and when should somebody be like, well, I'm gonna try to delay it, or I'm gonna try to abstain from it for a certain amount of time, or at least lower it a lot in my life. So how would you know, should you go one way or the other?
Well, I have, I also have a podcast called Life After
Yes.
Sugar. And on episode 12, it's a very popular episode because I get into whether you are an abstainer or a moderator. In other words, whether your natural personality tends more towards all or nothing, not just for sugar, but for everything in your life. Some of us, myself included, maybe you as well, we're like, we throw ourselves into things, or we are like passionate about things, or we make lists for things and we organize and plan things. Those are pretty much signs that you're probably more of an abstainer, that this kind of all or nothing approach fits your natural personality. And people who are more moderators, they kind of, my husband's like that. He's gonna take time to think about things and to mull them over and to look at all it. Both, it's not like one type of person is better than another, but it's just that some people are better with step by step, gradually doing something, again, whether it's cutting sugar or not, and other people are more all or nothing, black or white or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I like to answer your question, how do you know whether it's better off for you to cut sugar completely all at once or to do it gradually? Well, I would say respect your natural personality, because really, if you go against that, it's not likely to be very sustainable, because you're fighting yourself plus the battle to fight sugar, which in itself has a hold on most of us.
It really does.
So it's like, if you want to just fight one battle at a time, do a little bit of introspection to see what kind of person you are naturally and go with that. Obviously, we're not all 8 billion of us we can't really split us into two groups only, but what's your tendency? And you can listen to episode 12 of the Life After Sugar podcast to sort of see, okay, what do you mean? Because a lot of people tell us, oh, you can eat sugar in moderation.
Right.
And
moderation.
That particular episode I did is my gentle rant about stop telling me to eat sugar in moderation. It doesn't work for me.
And it doesn't work for everyone. I certainly can say that I know a lot of people that have the personality that you described, where it's very much like they are very organized, they're very type A, and they're all or nothing. And it's kind of going to be the same when it comes to any sort of addictive personality. When it comes to, I mean, sugar's addictive. Let's face it. I mean, it's a very addictive thing. So when it comes to something that could be so addictive, if you have that type of personality and you're sitting here going, yep, that's me, and you're struggling so much with sugar, it might be time for you to take a closer look at your relationship with sugar and see, well, maybe I should just totally abstain from it. And that might be best for your life. And so when somebody comes off sugar, say that somebody out there is listening and they want nothing to do with sugar anymore, they want to get rid of it from their life, would you tell somebody slowly take away the sugar, or would you say just cut it off and let the cards fall where they may? Or how do you handle that?
Yeah, well, a little bit like I mentioned before, I actually first talk about the person and not the sugar, right? It's the person, the individual, that deserves the attention. And sugar's kind of like an afterthought, in the sense that what matters is you, who you are, what your natural personality is like. Once we get that sorted, then the answer actually makes itself evident from that sort of self-analysis, as it were. So if you come to the conclusion that you are more of an all or nothing kind of person, then the natural extension of that is that you're probably better off cutting out sugar completely all at once.
I agree. I totally agree. I think that's true for anything that you're have a habit or it's a bad habit. Just cutting it off completely is usually the way to go, unless it's like a pharmaceutical type thing, then you have to talk to your doctor. However, when you're coming off sugar and you say I'm done and you're like, today's my first day with no sugar, what should somebody expect after that? Like physical signs? I mean, I've seen across the board things happen. So
Yeah.
what do you tell people? Like what should you expect in these next few weeks?
Well, yes, like you were saying, for your own body that's extra sensitive to hormones, people react differently. And if your body has been used to running on glucose, which is basically what sugar breaks down into really fast, and then suddenly your body's not receiving that level of glucose from the food that you're eating, right? I'm not saying no glucose, I'm just saying a lot less when you cut sugar. And I also include flour in that because flour also breaks down into glucose really fast. So if your body is suddenly not running on all that glucose or fast acting glucose, then you might have some what they call detox symptoms. I certainly did back in 2015. And so I was completely out of action, exhausted for about 2 days. I went for a 15-minute nap and woke up 2 days later.
Wow.
My
Yeah.
body was like, I'm checking out. I can't
Yeah.
handle this. You may experience that you are more thirsty and that you pee more as well.
Okay.
And there's biological reasons for this. You may have flu-like symptoms. You may get the shakes. Sometimes it's like coming off of, a really hard drugs, depending on how your body functions with or without, like with a lot less glucose. So I've also met people that have had absolutely no effects whatsoever, and they're still my friends.
Oh, that's good.
And so basically, be prepared for the worst and be prepared for the psychological effects, not just the physical effects, because I think we underestimate how attached we are to sugar and what it means to us. We always speak of sugar in relation to treats, right? And that kind of emotional connection to sugar is what is the toughest, because really, if we didn't have any kind of emotional connection to sugar, we'd just stop eating it, and that would be that.
Yeah.
The fact is, it's not that easy.
When we're children, what are we given when we're good? Let's go to ice cream. Let's get a treat. And I do it with my own kids sometimes. Like, this is just. Is it really a treat when it makes you crazy? Like for children, it just sends them into a crazy sugar storm. But is it really a treat, especially for adults, when you're eating something that makes you feel like garbage, or maybe you're chewing it and it tastes delicious, but then 4 hours later you're in the bathroom with a stomach ache.
Right.
So so that all being said, I understand not everyone's going to just ditch sugar. I get that. I understand some people should. However, moving into the season that we're about to move into, the holiday season, there's lots of these treats around. The quality varies of where you are, depends, but what is your best tip going into the holiday season if you are trying to reduce, or maybe you're just abstaining from sugar completely? What are your tips, especially just going into all of this holiday hoopla, lots of parties and stuff?
Yes. I think one of the things to be aware of is that the holiday season is a North American thing and not necessarily worldwide. So it's very culturally based, and it's not a human thing like around the world. It's not a universal thing. So just to be aware that, where you live, if it happens to be in North America, then you're going to be bombarded with this stuff. Obviously, you can't just go and move to another country. But just be aware that this is just a cultural construct, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't take away from the fact that it's all around you, but just be aware of the culture that you live in
It's a good
that
thing
has
to remind
created,
everyone of.
yeah, that has created this situation.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is um, what has helped me the most over the last 8 years, and this is my 9th year of the holiday
Wow.
season. I sound British, which I am, but I live in Canada, so we have the
Right.
craziness too. What's helped me the most is, again, that side of my personality that is that goes against the grain, that is
Mm.
sort of it's a bit like a game. How
Mm-hmm.
can I do the opposite of what's expected of me and have fun doing that? Not everyone
Mm.
has that type of personality, because a lot of
Yeah.
us feel uncomfortable being different from other people. But it might be fun to approach it as a game with a bit more sort of joy and fun, and say, let's just see how much fun I can have without sugar this year. Let's see if I'm even capable of having fun without giving away that kind of power. I call it your personal power, without
Yeah.
giving it away to sugar.
Sure. That I like that. I like giving yourself like a challenge. I'm gonna get through this holiday season and I'm gonna find things on that table that aren't sugar and that are
Yeah.
delicious.
And even non-food sources of fun, right? And
Yes.
just enjoying who you're celebrating with, and practicing that being enough. I think from my own students in my program, what I found is that it takes a little bit of a mindset shift or a reframe to live your life during the holiday season or at any time of the year, and to enjoy things being enough. And
Yeah.
sometimes, without wanting to diminish the sort of the suffering of sugar detox or this big change in your diet, sometimes I say that cutting sugar is a first world problem.
Mm.
When you look around, again, other countries, other situations in the world where they are fighting for their very existence, the fact that you may not be eating pumpkin pie this year is a first world problem.
You're
And
right.
and again, I don't want it to sound like it's not important to you. I'm just saying sometimes it's helpful just to see it in relation to what real problems might be.
Absolutely. It is about perspective. Changing your
Right.
perspective, change your mindset. And you're right. It is a first world problem. There's much worse things happening than whether or not you can have your pie at, with Thanksgiving. So,
And all that being said, it probably will be very uncomfortable to refuse or to have set out not to have any, and then to feel like you've fallen off the wagon and you are having some. It's all very uncomfortable. Anything new, and I say this as a teacher, anything new is uncomfortable. So the other tip I would have is to sort of get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
expect to be uncomfortable and
Yeah.
get comfortable with it. I like that. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that a lot of us, whether it's cutting sugar or whether it's fasting or anything at all that's different, is going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So a lot of us don't want to embrace that and don't want to sit with that feeling. But when we sit with it and we embrace it, that's when we get to the other side of the bullshit, if you will.
Yeah, well said. And it's ironic in a way, because if you're eating all the sugar and the flour and the processed foods, I'm just wondering how comfortable you actually are now.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So I just want to thank you again. You've been great. It's always so much fun talking to you. And I feel a little bit more secure myself going into this holiday season. And I am a moderator when it comes to sugar. And I think my listeners know that. But I think that my personality, it is all or nothing, but I have somehow mastered moderation.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Netta, so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, it's so great to talk with someone like Michelle who gets you. You know how you feel heard and seen by some people because they can relate to what you're experiencing and you can relate to what they're experiencing? Well, this is how it feels for me with Michelle and maybe for you too. If you're in perimenopause or are already menopausal and you're an intermittent faster as well, I hope this episode has been enlightening for you. And I hope it's made you feel seen and understood. Let me know. You can always get in touch with me. You could even tell me in a review of this podcast or just reach out on social media. And you can also get in touch with Michelle. Her podcast is called Fast and Fabulous. Well, that pretty much sums us up, don't you think? And if you want to go deeper into your relationship with sugar so that you can get rid of cravings, lose extra pounds, and finally feel in control around food, then there are 2 ways that we can work together. First, in the After Sugar Club, which is designed to give you support and accountability through our live check-in calls at a more affordable price. The After Sugar Club is always open for you. Check out the After Sugar Club private membership when you go to aftersugarclub.com, click on After Sugar Club in the top menu. And for more step-by-step guidance and customized support to help you get rid of cravings so that you can slim down and finally feel in control around food, there's my 90-day program, Freedom from Cravings Formula, which opens a few times a year. To get more info about the program and when it next opens, go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to schedule a clarity call with me so that we can talk together to see if the Freedom from Cravings Formula program is a good fit for you. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.